I am Vanessa, 32 years old, and I manage technology projects for a living. When my mom called to say she could not afford to fly to my wedding, I felt that familiar ache. Our relationship had always been complicated, but I tried so hard to bridge the gaps between us. I swallowed my disappointment and told her I understood. How could I have known that 3 weeks later, a single Facebook notification would unravel everything I thought I knew about my family? That a casual scroll would reveal the truth that would change everything. Before I continue my story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If this resonates with you already, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about family betrayal and finding strength when you least expect it. Growing up in Chicago in a middle-class neighborhood, my childhood started out fairly normal. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house with a small backyard where I would spend hours playing with our golden retriever, Max. My dad, Thomas, worked as an engineer, and my mom, Eleanor, was an administrative assistant at a local community college. My sister Jessica was 3 years younger than me, and from the outside, we probably looked like any other American family. Everything changed when I was 10 years old. I still remember the night my parents sat me down in our living room. The television was off, which was unusual for a Friday evening, and there was a heaviness in the air that even as a child I could recognize. "Vanessa," my dad started, his voice cracking slightly, "your mom and I have decided that we are not going to live together anymore." The divorce was messy. There were screaming matches behind closed doors that I pretended not to hear, hushed phone calls, and tense exchanges during drop-offs and pickups. Within 6 months, my mom announced that she, Jessica, and I would be moving to Michigan to live with my grandmother, Margaret. "It will be better for everyone," she explained as I sobbed in my bedroom, surrounded by half-packed boxes. "Your grandma has a bigger house, and we will be closer to family." I did not want to leave my school, my friends, or my dad, but I had no choice. Dad promised he would visit often, but after he remarried a year later and had 2 children with his new wife, those visits became increasingly rare. Eventually, they stopped altogether, replaced by occasional birthday cards and awkward phone calls on holidays. Living with Grandma Margaret was comfortable in many ways. Her home was indeed larger, a sprawling 4-bedroom house in a nice suburb of Detroit. She had money from selling my grandfather's manufacturing business after he passed away when I was only 3. But the emotional landscape of our new home was complicated. From the beginning, there was a strange dynamic. My mom and Jessica formed a tight unit, often excluding me from their activities. They would go shopping together, have movie nights while I was doing homework, and share inside jokes I was never part of. When I would try to join in, there would always be some reason why I could not. "This is just for me and Jess," Mom would say. "You would not enjoy it anyway. You are too serious, just like your father." Being compared to my dad was never a compliment in my mother's eyes. As the years passed, I became the practical one, the responsible one, the one who helped Grandma with chores while Mom and Jessica bonded. I learned to cook, to manage household tasks, to be self-sufficient out of necessity rather than choice. I became the mini adult of the family at just 11 years old. When I turned 16, I got my first job at a local bookstore. I loved the independence it gave me, and I started saving for college, determined to build my own life. My mother, who had been chronically underemployed since the divorce, often asked to borrow money from my meager savings. "Just $20 for gas, Vanessa. I will pay you back on Friday. I need $50 for Jessica's school trip. You know how important these experiences are for her." The money was never repaid, and I gradually realized it was expected that I would contribute to the household. Meanwhile, I noticed that Mom and Jessica always seemed to have money for manicures, new clothes, or concert tickets. For my high school graduation, Mom promised a special celebration. "We will go to that Italian restaurant you love," she said. "Just the 4 of us. It will be perfect." The day came and I dressed up, excited for this rare acknowledgement of my achievement. 2 hours before our reservation, Mom came into my room. "Honey, I am so sorry, but Jessica is not feeling well. We will have to reschedule." I later discovered through a friend's social media post that Jessica had actually gone to a party that night. When I confronted Mom, she became defensive. She was sick earlier, but felt better. "Should I have forced her to stay home just because you wanted a fancy dinner? We can celebrate another time." That other time never came. Similar scenarios played out for college graduation, my 25th birthday, and countless other milestones. There was always an excuse, Always a reason why my achievements were overlooked or my needs deprioritized. Despite all this, I continued to maintain a relationship with my family. I called weekly, sent thoughtful gifts for birthdays and holidays, and visited Michigan several times a year. I helped Mom navigate job applications when she was between positions, spent hours on the phone helping Jessica with college essays, and even contributed to my grandmother's 80th birthday party when Mom claimed she could not afford her share. "You make good money now," she would say. "It is not a big deal for you to help out." And I did make good money. After college, I had moved back to Chicago and built a successful career in project management for a technology company. I had worked hard, saved carefully, and created a stable life for myself. But no matter how much I gave emotionally or financially, it never seemed to be enough to secure my place in the family. Each time I would visit Michigan, I would return to Chicago feeling drained, questioning myself. Was I too sensitive? Was I expecting too much? Was there something fundamentally unlovable about me that made my own mother and sister keep me at arm's length? Still, I kept trying. I kept calling. I kept visiting. I kept hoping that someday, somehow, things would change. 4 years ago, my company sent me to a technology conference in Boston. I was scheduled to speak on a panel about implementing agile methodologies in traditional organizations, a topic I had become somewhat of an expert on. After my session, a tall man with kind eyes approached me with questions about my presentation. "I work for a law firm that is trying to modernize its project management systems," he explained. "Everything you described is exactly what we are struggling with." His name was Daniel, and he was the head of digital transformation at a prestigious law firm. We exchanged business cards and agreed to meet for coffee the next day to continue our conversation. What was supposed to be a quick professional meeting turned into a 3-hour discussion that flowed from work to books to travel to family. There was an ease to talking with Daniel that I had rarely experienced. He listened, really listened, in a way that made me feel valued. When I cautiously shared some of my family history, expecting the usual awkward response, he shared his own experiences with empathy and understanding. "Family dynamics can be so complex," he said, "and the narratives we grow up with shape how we see ourselves, sometimes in ways we do not even recognize. We lived in different cities, me in Chicago and him in Boston, but we started dating long distance. Every other weekend, one of us would fly to the other city. We would explore museums, try new restaurants, and spend hours talking. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen and accepted." Daniel came from a close-knit family. His parents had been married for 40 years, and he and his 2 brothers spoke to each other almost daily. The first time he took me home to meet them, I was overwhelmed by the warmth with which they welcomed me. His mother hugged me like I was already part of the family, and his father asked thoughtful questions about my work, genuinely interested in my answers. "Is this what normal families are like?" I whispered to Daniel that night as we got ready for bed in his childhood room. "I do not know about normal," he said gently, "but this is what loving families can be like." As our relationship grew, Daniel struggled to understand my continued efforts with my own family, despite the constant disappointment. "Why do you keep trying so hard with people who do not seem to value you?" he asked after one particularly difficult phone call with my mother. "Because they are my family," I said simply, "and I keep hoping that someday it will be different." Daniel did not push, but I could tell he worried about how these relationships affected me. He was protective without being controlling, supportive without being judgmental. After 2 years of long-distance dating, Daniel was offered a position at a Chicago law firm. "I think it is time we lived in the same city," he said, "and I would rather move to you than ask you to leave the company you love." 6 months after he moved to Chicago, on a crisp fall evening by Lake Michigan, Daniel proposed. He had arranged a private dinner on a rooftop overlooking the water, with the city lights twinkling around us. "You have taught me what resilience looks like," he said, kneeling before me. "You have shown me how to love without conditions. I want to build a life with you, Vanessa. Will you marry me?" Through tears of joy, I said yes. Planning our wedding brought both excitement and anxiety. We decided on a destination wedding in San Diego, choosing a beautiful venue overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The weather would be perfect in May, and we loved the idea of giving our guests a mini vacation. When it came time to create our guest list, I hesitated over my family members' names. "Do you think they will come?" I asked Daniel. "I do not know," he said honestly, "but I think you will regret it if you do not invite them." I sent formal invitations to my mother, sister, grandmother, and extended family members, following up with personal phone calls to each of them. My mother's response was characteristically non-committal. "It sounds lovely, honey," she said, "but California is so far, and flights are so expensive these days." "I know it is a big ask," I said, "but it would mean the world to me to have you there. If money is an issue, Daniel and I would be happy to help with the flights." "Absolutely not," she responded sharply. "I am not taking charity from my own daughter for her wedding. We will figure it out." Over the next few months, Mom oscillated between enthusiasm and hesitation. One week she would call asking about dress codes and hotel recommendations, and the next she would sigh about the difficulty of getting time off work, though she was between jobs again. Jessica was more straightforward in her disinterest. "A destination wedding is kind of selfish, don't you think?" she said during one of our rare phone conversations. "Not everyone can afford to drop everything and fly across the country for your big day." Despite these reactions, I held on to hope. I had dreamed of having my family at my wedding since I was a little girl, playing with dolls in a makeshift wedding veil. I wanted my mother to help me get ready, to see pride in her eyes as I walked down the aisle. I wanted my sister to stand beside me as a bridesmaid, to repair some of the distance between us through this shared experience. Daniel and I spent months planning every detail. We chose a small, intimate ceremony with only 60 guests. We worked extra hours and cut back on expenses to save for the wedding we envisioned. We selected local vendors, wrote personal vows, and created welcome bags for our out-of-town guests. As the RSVP deadline approached, I checked the mail anxiously each day. Daniel's family responded promptly with enthusiastic acceptances. Friends from college and work confirmed their attendance, but the response cards from my family remained conspicuously absent. "Maybe they are just running late," Daniel suggested, though I could hear the doubt in his voice. I called my mother again, trying to sound casual. "Just checking in about the wedding RSVPs. The venue needs a final head count soon." "Oh, we have been meaning to talk to you about that," she said. "Let me call you back tomorrow when I have more time." That call back never came. 3 weeks before the wedding, I was at my desk reviewing timelines with our wedding planner when my phone rang. Seeing my mother's name on the screen, I excused myself and answered with hopeful anticipation. "Hi, Mom. Did you get the information I sent about the hotel block?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I immediately sensed what was coming. "Vanessa, I need to talk to you about the wedding," she began, her voice taking on that particular tone she used when delivering disappointing news. "Jessica and I have looked at our finances, and we just cannot afford the flight to California right now. We have tried to make it work, but with the hotel costs and everything else, it is just not possible." My heart sank. Despite preparing myself for this possibility, hearing the words still felt like a physical blow. "But I offered to help with the flights," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "That offer still stands. It is really important to me to have you there." "We cannot accept that," she replied firmly. "We have our pride, Vanessa. We cannot have you paying for us to attend your wedding. What would people think?" "I do not care what people would think," I said, a rare edge creeping into my voice. "No one would even know. I just want my family there on the most important day of my life." "It is not just the money," she continued, ignoring my rising emotion. "Your grandmother is not feeling well enough for that kind of travel, and Jessica just started a new job and cannot take the time off." This was the first I had heard about either of these issues, despite speaking to my grandmother the previous week when she had mentioned her garden club activities and an upcoming trip to her friend's lake house. "I see," I said, not seeing it all. "We will be there in spirit," my mother added brightly. "Maybe we can set up one of those video calls so we can watch, and we will have a little celebration when you visit next." Jessica got on the phone next, her tone a practiced mix of regret and practicality. "It sucks, but that is adult life, right? Not everything works out the way we want. You will have a great time without us. Daniel's family is so much fancier than ours anyway. They will probably be relieved not to have to mingle with us commoners." I ended the call as quickly as I could, then sat at my desk, tears streaming down my face. The wedding planner, seeing my distress, quietly excused herself to give me privacy. Daniel found me there 20 minutes later, still crying. I told him about the conversation, trying to relay the facts without emotion, but failing miserably. "I should have expected this," I said between sobs. "It is the same pattern we have always had. I do not know why I thought my wedding would be any different." Daniel held me tightly, his own anger visible beneath his concern. You had every right to expect your family to be there for you on our wedding day. There is nothing unreasonable about that hope. That night, cuddled on our couch with takeout and a bottle of wine, I cried again. Am I being selfish? Should we have done a local wedding instead of San Diego? Vanessa, Daniel said firmly, we chose San Diego because we love it there and could afford it. You offered to help with their flights. You have done everything possible to include them. This is not about location or money. You know that deep down. I did know, but admitting that my family simply did not prioritize me enough to make the effort was too painful to fully acknowledge. The next few weeks were a blur of final wedding preparations. Daniel's parents, sensing my heartbreak, went above and beyond to make me feel loved. His mother called daily with little questions and observations about the wedding plans. His father sent me a beautiful letter about how proud they were to welcome me to their family. We may not be your blood, he wrote, but we are your family now in every way that matters. On the morning of our wedding, I woke up in a beautiful suite overlooking the ocean. Daniel had stayed in another room, honoring the tradition of not seeing each other before the ceremony. His mother and sisters-in-law came to help me get ready, bringing mimosas and breakfast. Your hair looks gorgeous, Daniel's mother said as the stylist put the finishing touches on my updo. I wish I had your natural waves. As she helped me into my dress, I thought about how my own mother should have been there, zipping me up, perhaps sharing stories about her own wedding day. The absence felt like a physical presence in the room. Daniel's sister noticed my expression in the mirror. Hey, she said gently, today is about you and Daniel and the life you are building together. Focus on that joy. She was right, of course. And as I walked down the aisle toward Daniel, seeing his eyes light up at the sight of me, I felt a surge of pure happiness that temporarily pushed aside the sadness. The ceremony was beautiful, personal, and moving. We exchanged vows we had written ourselves, promising to build a family based on trust, respect, and unconditional love. At the reception, surrounded by friends and Daniel's family, I made a conscious effort to be present and enjoy the celebration. We danced, laughed, and toasted to our future. Daniel's father gave a heartfelt speech that brought tears to everyone's eyes. To Daniel and Vanessa, he concluded, raising his glass, may you always be each other's safe harbor and greatest adventure. There was no speech from my side of the family. No mother-daughter dance, no sibling toast. The table reserved for my family remained conspicuously empty throughout the evening, a visual reminder of their absence. Late in the evening, as the celebration continued around us, Daniel and I slipped away to the beach for a quiet moment alone. Are you okay? He asked, his arm around my waist as we watched the waves crash against the shore. Yes and no, I answered honestly. Today has been the happiest day of my life, marrying you. But there is still this ache. I cannot help but wonder why I am not enough for them to make an effort. Daniel kissed my forehead. That is their loss, and it says everything about them and nothing about you. We returned to the reception, determined to focus on the love that surrounded us rather than the love that was withheld, and for the most part, we succeeded. But as we left for our honeymoon the next day, I could not shake the lingering hurt. The feeling that even on my wedding day, I had once again been deemed unworthy of my family's presence. 2 weeks after returning from our honeymoon in Bali, I was settling back into normal life. The post-wedding blues had hit me harder than expected, partly due to the letdown after months of planning and partly due to the continued hurt over my family's absence. That Saturday morning, I was sipping coffee and idly scrolling through Facebook while Daniel made breakfast. My Aunt Janet, my mother's sister who lived in Florida, had posted a new photo album. I clicked on it without much thought, expecting to see the usual pictures of her garden or her cat. What I saw instead made my coffee mug slip from my hand and crash to the floor. The first photo showed my mother, sister, grandmother, and several other family members standing on the deck of a massive cruise ship, drinks in hand, smiling broadly at the camera. My mother wore a wide-brimmed sun hat and designer sunglasses I had never seen before. Jessica was making a peace sign, looking carefree and happy. My grandmother, supposedly not well enough to travel, stood unaided in the center of the group, beaming. The caption read, Day 1 of our Caribbean cruise. So blessed to have the whole family together for this special trip. My hands shaking, I scrolled through more photos. There was my mother at a poolside bar, cocktail raised in a toast. There was Jessica parasailing above turquoise waters. There was my grandmother participating in what appeared to be a dance competition on the ship's main deck. Photo after photo showed them enjoying elaborate meals, shore excursions, and evening entertainment. In one particularly painful image, they were all dressed up for a formal night, my mother wearing an expensive-looking evening gown. The final blow came when I noticed the dates on the posts. The cruise had departed 3 days before my wedding and returned a week after. They had not been unable to afford flights to my wedding. They had chosen to take a luxury Caribbean cruise instead. As I stared at the evidence of their deception, another notification appeared. My aunt had tagged my mother in the album. Clicking through to my mother's profile, I discovered more photos she had shared with her privacy settings limited, keeping them hidden from me. Her own caption read, "Best family vacation ever. So grateful for this time with my mother and daughter." The floor seemed to drop from beneath me. They had deliberately excluded me from a family vacation scheduled during my wedding. They had lied repeatedly and elaborately about their reasons for not attending, and they had taken care to hide the evidence. Though my aunt's careless tagging had exposed their deception, I must have made a sound because Daniel came running from the kitchen. He found me on the couch, phone clutched in my hand, tears streaming down my face. "Vanessa, what happened? Are you okay?" Wordlessly, I handed him my phone. He sat beside me, scrolling through the photos, his expression changing from confusion to disbelief to anger. They went on a cruise. During our wedding. His voice was incredulous. A Caribbean cruise, after they said they could not afford flights to San Diego. I nodded, unable to speak through the knot in my throat. "And your grandmother, who was supposedly too ill to travel, is doing the cha-cha on a cruise ship deck?" Another nod. Daniel set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode. His jaw was tight, a muscle twitching in his cheek the way it did when he was truly angry. "This is beyond hurtful, Vanessa. This is deliberate cruelty." The shock was giving way to a pain so acute it felt physical. Why would they do this? Why go to such lengths to avoid my wedding, but then spend what must have been thousands of dollars on a cruise? Why lie? Why hide it? Daniel pulled me close as I broke down completely, my body shaking with sobs. All the years of making excuses for their behavior, of accepting less than I deserved, of hoping for change, came crashing down around me. The truth was undeniable now, captured in those smiling photos. My own mother had chosen a vacation over my wedding and had lied to my face about it. "I have always known I was not a priority," I whispered once I could speak again. "But I never thought they would be so deliberately hurtful." Daniel was silent for a long moment, his lawyer's mind clearly working through something. Finally, he spoke, his voice careful. "Vanessa, there is something else going on here. This is not just about your wedding, or even about their typical pattern of behavior. This feels calculated." "What do you mean?" "Think about it. They did not just decline to come to the wedding. They planned an elaborate alternative at the exact same time, involving multiple family members. They deliberately concealed it from you. That suggests a level of coordination and intentionality that goes beyond their usual thoughtlessness." He was right. This was different from their past behavior. This felt orchestrated, almost punitive. But why? What could possibly justify such an action? As if reading my thoughts, Daniel continued, "Is there anything happening in your family that might explain this? Any changes in circumstances? Any upcoming events? Any conflicts you have not mentioned?" I started to shake my head, then paused. My 35th birthday is coming up in a few months, but I cannot see how that would be relevant. Daniel's expression shifted, a look of realization dawning. "Your 35th birthday," he repeated slowly. "Vanessa, there is something I need to tell you." Daniel took a deep breath, his expression serious in a way that made my heart race. Whatever he was about to say, I knew it would change everything. A few months ago, I ran into a colleague from law school at a bar association event. He specializes in estate law and works for a firm in Detroit. We were catching up, and when I mentioned you and that we were getting married, his expression changed. He asked if your last name was Martinez and if your grandmother was Margaret Martinez. I nodded, confused about where this was going. He caught himself immediately and changed the subject, but it was clear he recognized your family. Later, after a few drinks, he mentioned that he had worked on an interesting estate plan for a wealthy client who had sold a manufacturing business. He did not name names, but the details matched what you have told me about your grandmother. "What about it?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. According to him, this client had set up a trust for her grandchildren that would distribute substantial assets when they turned 35. He mentioned it because it was an unusual age specification. Most trusts distribute at 21 or 25. My mind was racing. Are you saying my grandmother has money set aside for me that I did not know about? Daniel nodded. Based on what my colleague let slip, it sounds like your grandmother established a significant trust for her grandchildren, to be distributed when they reach 35, which for you is 3 months from now. I finished the implications hitting me like a physical blow. I did not mention it before because it felt like privileged information that my colleague should not have shared, and I did not want to raise your hopes about money that might not exist, or that might come with strings attached. But now, with what has happened, you think this is connected? I asked, though I was already seeing the pattern myself. I think it is worth considering. Your family suddenly takes an expensive cruise exactly when you are getting married, after telling you they cannot afford to attend. Your grandmother, who supposedly was too ill to travel to your wedding, is well enough for a cruise. And this happens just months before you would potentially receive a significant inheritance. I leaned back against the couch, trying to process this new information. So what? They are trying to make me so angry that I cut off contact with the family before my birthday so I would not receive the inheritance? Daniel shrugged. Or they are trying to hurt you badly enough that you would not question why they suddenly distanced themselves from you after your birthday. If they gradually pulled away now, citing hurt feelings over wedding drama, you might not connect it to the trust distribution later. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The elaborate deception, the timing, the involvement of multiple family members all pointed to a coordinated effort. There is more, I said slowly, memories surfacing. Last year, when Mom was having trouble making her mortgage payment, she mentioned that Grandma had co-signed on the house. I offered to help, but she refused, saying Grandma had worked out an arrangement with the bank. Daniel's eyebrows rose. So your grandmother might be financially supporting your mother in significant ways. And Jessica, too, probably. She has never seemed to struggle, despite changing jobs frequently and living in an expensive apartment. I always assumed she was just better with money than Mom. But what if your grandmother has been supporting both of them all along? Daniel finished. And they are worried that if you receive your portion of the trust, that support might diminish. It was like pieces of a puzzle suddenly fitting together. The decades of emotional distance, the consistent prioritization of Jessica over me, the strange dynamics whenever money was discussed. It had never been just about personality conflicts or my resemblance to my father. There was a financial element I had never suspected. But why would Grandma even set up a trust for me if she was going to let them sabotage my relationship with the family? I asked, still struggling to make sense of it all. Maybe she does not know what they are doing, Daniel suggested, or maybe the trust was established long ago, before family dynamics evolved to where they are now. Trust can be difficult to change once they are established. I stood up and began pacing, anger replacing shock. So they deliberately skipped my wedding, lied to my face, and took a luxury cruise instead, all to sabotage my relationship with my grandmother before I could receive an inheritance she intended for me. Daniel's expression was grim. It sounds calculating and cruel, but based on the evidence, it is a possibility we need to consider. I stopped pacing and faced him. What should we do? Daniel thought for a moment. First, we need to verify if the trust actually exists and what its terms are. I can reach out to some contacts in estate law who might be able to help us navigate this. If there is a trust, you have legal rights as a beneficiary regardless of your personal relationship with your grandmother. And if it does exist, then we need to decide how to proceed. We could confront your family directly, though that carries risks. Or we could wait until your birthday and see what happens. Or we could take a more formal legal approach. My mind was spinning with implications, possibilities, and a deep sense of betrayal that eclipsed anything I had felt before. All those years of feeling like an outsider in my own family, of questioning my worth, of making excuses for their behavior, came into sharp focus. It had not been my imagination. There had been a calculated effort to keep me at a distance, and now I understood at least part of the reason why. I want to know my rights, I said firmly. If Grandma intended for me to receive this inheritance, then I should receive it regardless of what Mom and Jessica have done to interfere. Daniel nodded. I agree. And Vanessa, whatever we discover, remember that none of this reflects on your worth as a person. The fact that they would go to these lengths says everything about them and nothing about you. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Call your lawyer friend now. Daniel pulled out his phone and dialed. As he explained our situation to his colleague, I stared at the photos still visible on my phone screen. My family smiling and celebrating without me, deliberately choosing a vacation over my wedding, all while lying to my face. The pain was still acute, but now it was hardening into something else, something stronger, resolve. Whatever came next, I would no longer make excuses for their behavior. I would no longer question my own worth based on their treatment, and I would no longer allow them to manipulate and deceive me without consequences. Daniel's colleague, James, confirmed our suspicions. After making some discreet inquiries, he discovered that my grandmother had indeed established a trust for her grandchildren with distributions to be made when each of us turned 35. The amount was substantial, several $1,000,000 for each grandchild, representing our portion of the proceeds from the sale of my grandfather's business. From what I can gather, James explained during a conference call the next day, the trust is irrevocable, meaning your grandmother cannot change the terms even if she wanted to. As long as you are alive on your 35th birthday, you are legally entitled to your distribution. Could my mother or sister have access to the money? I asked. Not directly, James replied, but if your grandmother has been supporting them from her own funds, she might have less to give them if your portion is distributed as planned, or they might be worried about influence, that you could persuade your grandmother to change her will regarding the remainder of her estate. Daniel, who had been taking notes, looked up. What are Vanessa's options here? You have several, James said. You could wait until your birthday and see if the distribution happens as planned. You could directly confront your grandmother and ask about the trust. Or you could send a formal letter through an attorney, putting your family on notice that you are aware of the trust and expect your rights as a beneficiary to be honored. I considered these options carefully. Waiting seemed passive, allowing my family to continue their deception. A direct confrontation might lead to more lies or manipulation. The formal legal approach felt cold, but also clear and unambiguous. I think I want to let them know that I know, I said finally. Not through a lawyer, at least not yet, but I want them to understand that I have seen through their deception. After discussing strategy with Daniel and James, I decided on a simple approach. I would send an email to my mother, sister, and grandmother, including screenshots of the cruise photos. I would be direct but not accusatory, letting the evidence speak for itself. With Daniel beside me for moral support, I composed the email. I have seen the photos from your Caribbean cruise, which I now understand was scheduled during my wedding. I am also aware of the trust established by Grandma with distributions to occur on my 35th birthday. I have consulted with a lawyer regarding my rights as a beneficiary. Please direct any further communication to me through my attorney. I attached screenshots of the most damning photos, including ones where they were clearly celebrating on what should have been my wedding day. I added James's contact information, then took a deep breath and hit send. Are you okay? Daniel asked, squeezing my hand. No, I answered honestly, but I will be. Within 5 minutes, my phone began ringing. First my mother, then my sister, then my grandmother. I let all the calls go to voicemail. Text messages followed in rapid succession. From Mom, Vanessa, you need to call me right now. This is all a misunderstanding. From Jessica, way to overreact as usual. You have no idea what you are talking about. From various aunts and uncles, family business should stay within the family. You are making a terrible mistake. Think about what you are doing. I turned my phone to silent and handed it to Daniel. I cannot deal with this right now. He nodded, placing it face down on the coffee table. You do not have to. They can wait. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Daniel checked the peephole and turned to me, surprised. It is your grandmother. My heart raced. She flew to Chicago? Just like that, apparently. So, do you want to see her? I hesitated, then nodded. Yes, but I want you to stay with me. Daniel opened the door to reveal my grandmother looking smaller and older than I remembered. Her expression a mixture of anxiety and determination. Vanessa, she said, her voice quavering slightly, we need to talk. I gestured for her to enter, but remained standing, maintaining distance. How did you know where I live? I never gave you this address. Your mother had it, she replied, stepping inside and glancing around. This is a lovely home. Thank you. Why are you here, Grandma? She sighed heavily, sinking onto the edge of our sofa. I received your email. I wanted to explain in person. Explain why you lied about being too ill to attend my wedding while you were actually on a cruise, or explain why no one told me about the trust fund that becomes available on my 35th birthday. Her eyes widened. So you do know about the trust. How did you find out? Does it matter? What matters is that my own family deliberately deceived me, excluded me, and prioritized a vacation over my wedding day. And it seems that was all part of a plan to distance me from the family before my birthday, presumably to try to interfere with my inheritance. She had the grace to look ashamed. It was not like that. Not exactly. Then what was it like exactly? My grandmother looked down at her hands. Your mother and Jessica, they have always depended on me financially, more than you know. I pay Jessica's rent. I covered your mother's mortgage last year when she was going to default. I fund their lifestyle in ways that would shock you. And I am supposed to feel sorry for them because of that? No, she said quickly. I am just trying to explain. When they found out about the trust distribution, they were concerned, your mother especially. She worried that if you received such a substantial amount, you might influence me to stop supporting them. So their solution was to try to damage my relationship with you, to ensure I was excluded from the family entirely. She looked pained. They convinced me that you did not need the money, that you were doing so well on your own with your career and Daniel. They said the money would be better used supporting Jessica's new business venture and your mother's retirement. And the cruise? How does that fit into this narrative? It was Jessica's idea, my grandmother admitted. She said it would be best if we were all unavailable during your wedding, that it would create distance naturally. I knew it was wrong, but they were so insistent. Your mother said you probably did not want us there anyway, that Daniel's family was so much more your type of people. Each word was like a fresh wound, the deliberate manipulation, the calculated cruelty, the way they had used my grandmother's financial support as leverage. And you believe them. After all these years, you still let them speak for me, make decisions about my life without even talking to me directly. Tears filled her eyes. I have made so many mistakes, Vanessa. I allowed your mother to control the narrative about you for too long. I knew something was not right, but it was easier to go along than to confront the truth. Daniel, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. Mrs. Martinez was skipping the wedding, your idea or theirs? Theirs. Entirely theirs, she said emphatically. I wanted to come. I had even bought a dress. But Jessica said it would send mixed signals, that we needed to create distance before Vanessa's birthday. And when exactly did they tell you this plan? About 6 months ago, right after Vanessa and you announced the wedding date. I felt sick. For 6 months while I was planning my wedding, hoping for their attendance, they had been orchestrating my exclusion. I want to be clear about something, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I never knew about the trust. I never had any intention of asking you for money or interfering with how you support Mom and Jessica. All I ever wanted was to be treated like I belonged in this family. My grandmother began to cry in earnest. I am so sorry, Vanessa. I have failed you terribly. When your grandfather set up these trusts, he intended them to be equal gifts to all our grandchildren, no strings attached. He loved you so much, even in the short time he knew you. He would be heartbroken to see how things have turned out. What happens now? I asked. The trust distribution will proceed as planned on your birthday, she said firmly. That is non-negotiable. As for the rest, I need to make some changes. Your mother and Jessica have taken advantage of my guilt and manipulated me for too long. As she spoke, my phone began ringing again. My mother's name flashed on the screen. She has been calling nonstop since I left Michigan, my grandmother explained. She knows I am here. I picked up the phone and turned it off completely. Whatever she has to say, I am not ready to hear it. My grandmother nodded. I understand. But Vanessa, I hope that someday you might be willing to rebuild a relationship with me, separate from your mother and sister. I have made terrible mistakes, but I do love you. The words I had longed to hear for so many years now rang hollow in the face of such betrayal. I need time, I said honestly. This is not something I can just move past overnight. Of course, she said, rising to leave. Just know that your inheritance will be there regardless. It is yours by right, and nothing anyone does can change that. After she left, Daniel held me as I processed the confirmation of our suspicions. My own mother and sister had orchestrated an elaborate deception, all to maintain their financial advantage. They had used my wedding, one of the most important days of my life, as a pawn in their scheme. What do we do now? I asked Daniel. We wait, he said simply. The ball is in their court. They know that you know, and they know you have legal representation. There is nothing more we need to do right now except take care of yourself. The next few days brought a deluge of messages from my family. My mother alternated between rage, how dare you go behind my back, gaslighting, you are completely misunderstanding everything, and tearful pleas. We are family. We should be able to work this out." Jessica was more direct in her hostility. "You have always been selfish. Now you are trying to ruin everything for everyone else just because you can." I did not respond to any of it. Instead, I forwarded each message to James, who documented everything for potential future legal action if necessary. My grandmother, true to her word, began to create distance from my mother and sister. She called me once to let me know she had spoken with the trustees to ensure my distribution would proceed without interference. She did not ask for forgiveness or for a relationship, respecting my need for space. As my 35th birthday approached, the messages from my mother and sister grew more desperate. They tried different tactics: guilt, reconciliation, threats, bargaining. None of it moved me. The clarity that came with understanding their true motivations was like finally putting on glasses after years of squinting through fog. I had spent my entire life trying to earn the love and acceptance of people who had been actively working against my interests. No more. 6 months after discovering the truth about my family's deception, I sat in a sleek downtown office with Daniel and James, signing the final paperwork to officially receive my inheritance. The trust had distributed exactly as planned on my 35th birthday, despite my mother's desperate last-minute attempts to claim I was mentally unstable and unable to manage my own finances. "Congratulations," James said, shaking my hand. "Your grandfather would be proud to see you handling this with such grace and maturity." The amount was substantial, more than I had imagined, enough to secure our future and to do some real good in the world. Daniel and I had spent weeks discussing how best to use this unexpected blessing. "What are your plans for the funds?" James asked as we gathered our documents. "We are establishing a scholarship foundation," I explained, "for young adults from fractured families who need support for education or starting their careers, people who, like me, might not have the family backing that others take for granted." James nodded approvingly. "That is a wonderful tribute to your grandfather's legacy." Outside, as Daniel and I walked to lunch, I reflected on the tumultuous half-year behind us. The legal battles had been stressful, but ultimately straightforward. The emotional landscape had been far more complex to navigate. "How are you feeling?" Daniel asked, squeezing my hand. "Lighter," I replied, after a moment's thought. "Like I have put down a burden I did not even realize I was carrying." The process of disentangling myself from the toxic dynamics of my family had been painful but necessary. I had spent months in therapy, unpacking decades of manipulation and emotional neglect. I had grieved for the family I had longed for, but never truly had. And gradually, I had built something new from the ashes of those shattered illusions. My relationship with my grandmother had cautiously evolved. We spoke monthly, carefully rebuilding trust. She had made significant changes in her life, including requiring my mother and sister to support themselves financially for the first time in their adult lives. It was a rocky transition for them, met with resentment and accusations, but my grandmother had remained firm. "I enabled their worst behaviors for too long," she told me during one of our calls. "I thought I was helping, but I was actually preventing them from becoming self-sufficient, responsible adults. That stops now." My mother and Jessica had not accepted these changes gracefully. They continued to blame me for turning Grandma against them, refusing to acknowledge their own role in the situation. My mother had sent a letter, not apologizing, but explaining that everything she had done was for Jessica's benefit and that I had always been more independent and did not need the same level of support. It was the closest thing to honesty she had ever offered, though it came wrapped in justifications and excuses. I had read it, acknowledged it, and filed it away, neither accepting nor rejecting her perspective. Some relationships, I had learned, cannot be fixed, only managed from a safe distance. Daniel had been my rock throughout, providing unwavering support while allowing me space to process my feelings. His family had embraced me even more fully, understanding that the wounds from my own family ran deep, and offering the unconditional acceptance I had always craved. "We are thinking about starting a family," I told my therapist during one of our sessions, "and I am terrified of repeating the patterns I grew up with." "The fact that you are aware of those patterns and actively working to understand them already puts you miles ahead," she reassured me. "You are not destined to recreate your past." Those words had given me courage, and 3 months ago, I had discovered I was pregnant. Daniel and I were overjoyed, though my joy was tinged with both anticipation and anxiety about becoming a parent. "I will never make our child feel like they have to earn my love," I vowed to Daniel as we lay in bed one night. his hand resting protectively over my still flat stomach. They will always know they are enough exactly as they are. You will be an amazing mother, he whispered, because you know exactly what a child needs: unconditional love, consistent support, and honest communication. Everything you had to learn the hard way. Now, sitting across from Daniel at lunch, watching him study the menu with his usual careful consideration, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. I would not have made it through this without you, I said suddenly. He looked up, his expression softening. You are stronger than you know, Vanessa. You would have found your way eventually, but I am glad I could be beside you for the journey. Our child will never have to wonder if they are worthy of love, I said, touching my belly where our baby grew. They will never have to perform or achieve or give to be valued. No, they will not, Daniel agreed firmly. They will know they are loved simply because they exist, just like you deserve to be. That simple truth, which had eluded me for so many years, now seemed self-evident. My worth was not tied to what I could provide or how useful I could be to others. I deserved love and respect simply because I existed, just as every human does. The money from the inheritance was a blessing, but the true gift had been the clarity it brought. By revealing the true nature of my family dynamics, it had freed me from the endless cycle of trying to earn love that was never freely given. I had learned that family is not just about blood, but about who shows up, who tells the truth, who celebrates your joys, and soothes your sorrows. Daniel and his family had shown me what healthy family relationships look like. My friends had rallied around me during the difficult months of legal battles and emotional processing. And now, with our child on the way, I had the chance to create the family I had always longed for. What should we name the baby if it is a girl? Daniel asked, changing the subject to lighter territory. I smiled, thinking of all the possibilities ahead. I was thinking maybe hope or faith. Both beautiful, he said. Names that look forward, not back. Exactly, I replied, because that is where we are headed. Forward. As we finished our lunch and stepped back into the sunshine, I felt a sense of peace that had once seemed impossible. The road had been painful, the betrayals deep, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more whole than I had ever been. The family that had caused me so much pain no longer defined me. Instead, I was defining myself, creating boundaries where needed, and opening my heart where it was safe to do so. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who did not respect your worth? How did you find the strength to prioritize your own well-being? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Each journey is unique, but we can draw strength from knowing we are not alone in these struggles. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content about healing from family trauma and building healthy relationships. And share with someone who might need to hear that they deserve love without having to earn it. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and remember, you are worthy of respect and love exactly as you are.